Folks, when I tell you that the 2026 midterms are going to be the elections of our lifetimes, I mean it. And I'm not here to fill you with a line of BS. As it stands today, Republicans only have two seats standing between holding Congress and turning the next 2 years into an impeachment circus. And that's not the only battle. We also have the Senate, and there we only have four seats. And those seats are all tied to some very competitive elections. Now, while others out there want to fill you with undying hope and buzzwords to get clicks, I want to give you the reality because to me, the truth matters more than views on YouTube. Because, folks, this election is fundamentally important to how our next few years and maybe our lives are going to be. So I want to talk you through a few things today. I want to talk about the current status and the odds that Republicans have to hold the House and Senate. I want to talk about the factors that will be driving this election cycle. I want to talk about what could happen if we lose the House or if we lose the Senate or if we lose both. I also want to show you what history tells us because this isn't the first time we've experienced a midterm election. I also want to tell you what the Democrats and Republicans are doing. I want to tell you what the president's doing. But most importantly, I want to talk about what we can do because that may be the most important. So let's talk about the current status and our odds of winning right now. 218. That's the magic number of reps that we need to control the House. Right now, we have 220. Democrats have 215. That means if we lose two seats, Mike Johnson is going to be giving the gavel over to Hakeem Jeffries. Now, in the Senate, it's 53 Republicans to 47 Democrats. Democrats would need to flip four seats outright. But if the score lands on 50-50, Republicans would still hold control of the Senate because J.D. Vance, as vice president, would be the tiebreaker. Now, the generic ballot is also a factor. It has Democrats up somewhere between 4 and 6 points nationally. And that is very important because it sets the tone for this election. We also have to factor in the president's approval rating. And right now, whether you like it or not, it's sitting somewhere between 37 and 40%. And that means he's net underwater by about 17 to 22 points. Now, here's my take on those numbers. Okay, they look terrible on paper. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But polling in July doesn't automatically mean a loss in November. We've seen this movie before. We've seen what it looks like when numbers get treated like a foregone conclusion. We've seen what it looks like when these conclusions get made very early, and then we have voter turnout that ends up telling a completely different story. But here's the more and most important part of all of this. We cannot denounce these numbers and just say that polling is fake. Okay, we cannot do that. Because while some of it might be, you know what's not fake? You know what we can guarantee that's not fake? Democrats turning out to vote because they always do every cycle, especially during cycles like this when they're emotionally charged up against somebody like Donald Trump. Donald Trump drives Democrats to vote more than any other politician in history. Now, Republicans, on the other hand, we have a habit of thinking we're winning because unfortunately, we have an echo chamber. And that echo chamber right now is telling us we're killing it. And we cannot afford to fall for that. It's more than just turning out the vote. It's challenging the narrative. It's demanding critical thinking. It's talking through issues with our fellow Republicans who maybe might not be as fired up as we are. Every one of you knows somebody who's a little bit upset and maybe says, I'm not going to vote. It's not worth it. Doesn't matter. You need to impress upon them that it is. Because, folks, if we're not willing to fill the airwaves with the right messaging, the Democrats are going to do it for us. And they're pretty damn good at doing it. They have an uncanny ability to fill the airwaves and make it look like all of this stuff is coming from Republican sources. They are a propaganda machine. We've seen it. We know it. They tell us we're winning and we stay home. They tell us we're winning and we stop fighting the fights that we need to fight. And while the president is putting on a masterclass out there, he depends on us just as much as we depend on him. Okay. Number two, factors that are going to drive the election cycle. Number one is Congress and their approval rating. And right now it's between 15 to 20%. Now, if you look back in 2010, congressional approval was at about 20% at the midterms, and the president's party lost 50 seats. In 2018, we had almost the same number, and Republicans lost 41 seats and the House. And it's not a coincidence. That's an enthusiasm gap. Because if you look at polling, roughly 70% of Democrats this cycle say that this election matters more to them than any other election in their lives. If you ask that same question to Republicans, it's closer to 50%. Now, we have some top issues, okay, and these issues are going to drive votes. Number one is the economy. Two is healthcare. Three is immigration. And four is abortion. And that's all national polling. Now, healthcare itself is specifically a problem for Republicans because Medicaid was one of our core campaign commitments from the president, is polling underwater about 60 points nationally. Now, what's my take on this one? The enthusiasm gap is what worries me. It worries me way more than the generic ballot because a 4 to 6 point deficit is something we can survive. But a base that shows up half the time and at half the rate of the others, that's a losing factor. That's the number that every one of us should lose sleep at night over. But this all ties back to what I said earlier. We need to have and make our own enthusiasm, and we have to make it contagious. So what could happen? Well, there are four scenarios, and I'm going to go through three. Scenario one, Democrats flip the Senate, Republicans hold the House. Now, if that happens, Democrats would be able to stop every judicial nominee that Trump wants confirmed. They'll all get froze in a Democrat-controlled Judiciary Committee. There won't be any impeachment risk, though, because that would come from the House, and it would stay Republican. But in scenario two, if Democrats flip the House, but we still hold the Senate, well, then we would have a simple majority that would open up impeachment inquiries. That would set the tone for subpoenas landing on every cabinet secretary's desk on day one. There wouldn't be a risk of conviction here of impeachments because they would still need 2/3 of the Senate. And if Republicans still hold that chamber, impeachment wouldn't be possible. It would die. But that is also only if Republicans do what they're supposed to. Now, scenario three, if they flip both, well, this is the only version where impeachment isn't theater. It's a reality. This is what we cannot have happen because we would lose the presidency. Now, if you ask me which one of these I'd bet on happening, I'd say scenario two, because I look at the House math right now and it's very tight. And honestly, I don't think Congress has done a good enough job pushing forward the president's executive orders. And unfortunately, that's just where it stands right now. Congressional Republicans in the House need to bring home a win. Now, it sounds like, as of yesterday, the SAVE Act may be on that path. They still have to lock things in, or some version of it. And they also would have to convince the American people that Speaker Johnson and House Republican leadership were the ones driving it. That could be enough. Time will tell because this still has to go through the Senate. We know how they are, but that is the option. Now, what does history tell us about all of this? Well, if you look at the 6 midterms of past, and you're honest, you'd see that 2002, you had George Bush. Okay, he gained seats, but this was an exception. He had an approval rating of 90%, which was driven by 9/11. Patriotism was rampant. Okay. In 2006, you had Bush again. Okay. Democrats took both the House and the Senate. But that was really, a factor of war fatigue with Iraq. You had some corruption scandals, and Bush's approval collapsed into the high 30s. 2010 with Barack Obama, he lost 63 House seats. And by the way, this was the single worst loss in this stretch. And that was really because of the Affordable Care Act. There was a slow economy, and Barack Obama he was underwater the whole time with his approval rating. 2014, Obama's second term, Democrats lost the Senate, and it just was a downward spiral from there for him. I mean, the second midterm of a two-term presidency tends to hit the Senate even harder than the House. But in 2018, we had Trump, his first term. Okay, during his first midterm, he had 40 seats lost. He gained 2 in the Senate, but we lost the House. And his approval rating at that time was about 40%. But the thing is, Democratic turnout, was through the roof. And it was that way because they were just as emotional then as they will be this cycle because of Trump. They hate him. And if you go to 2022 with Biden, we took the House back. We only did it by a small margin. Biden's approval was bad, but the red wave never happened. And we can debate about that. I agree with you, but shouldn't have won, right? But if you look at the correlating factors here, the president's approval in that rating is still the single strongest factor. Okay, every year that Republicans lost, the president was underwater. The 1 year Republicans gained ground, we had an unthinkable approval rating because of 9/11. And that's something that can't be manufactured, kind of, depending what you think about 9/11. Now, second midterms, they're historically worse for the Senate specifically. And look, turnout and that differential can overrule these approval numbers like we saw in 2022. And this matters beyond the numbers because in 4 of these 6 cycles, the sitting president lost at least one chamber. And we know exactly what happens if one of those chambers is lost. Okay. President Trump faced it his first term when he lost the House. Now, talk about what the Democrats are doing. Okay. Because I think we all know that they're in disarray. And I think they've seen that plainly. You don't have to look very far. You really just have to look at this guy.
It's another poster before you. Mr. President, this is real. This is real, Mr. President. There is a countdown to impeachment. I have been very patient and waiting. I thought others might want to do what has to be done, and I say it has to be done. People can differ with me. I say it has to be done. It is the only...
Now, Al Green, okay, he's been promising Trump's impeachment for years. Now, if you consider what Al's doing, you'd see that the Democratic Party doesn't have a plan or strategy. What they have is a hostage situation right in their own conference. Now, Al Green lost his primary because he got his ass kicked, and he was a victim of what the Democrats are saying is redistricting. But regardless, he got demolished, and he's not going to be making or having the opportunity to see what his wet dreams put out there. But this tells you, right, where the Democratic Party is. They're in la-la land. They're facing crazies like Al, and they're also battling this eruption inside of their coalition. We have establishment figures that are fighting against a rising socialist left, and it's playing out in primary after primary. And Democratic leadership doesn't know what to do with it. They can't stop it, but they also won't admit it. If you ask Hakeem Jeffries what he thinks if the Republicans were to win the House, he won't say it publicly, but his plan would be what Al Green wants. He won't say it deliberately because, we already know what would happen. I mean, this is a party whose only strategy is opposing Donald Trump. Hating him is their platform. Okay. Now, if you want the version of these midterms that actually give you the facts and level with you instead of just trying to farm your outrage, I hope you stick with us, hit subscribe, hit the like button, and stay. All right. Love to have you. Now, let's talk about what are we doing as Republicans. Now, I first want to play Speaker Johnson for you. I'll give you his take.
Allowed to do as president, which is anything he wants. Very bullish about the midterms. Let me just tell you right now, as a leader of this little army in the House, we are ready for this fight. We're ready for this fight. We're called for it.
All right. Now, my take is that President Trump is going to have to drive turnout. Speaker Johnson and House Republicans really need to focus on bringing home a win for the House. Okay. The Save America Act, like I said before, cost of living, Medicaid, it's something. Right now, Speaker Johnson, unfortunately, is living in a fairy tale. I mean, he thinks that people are going to show up enthusiastically, and Trump is not even on the ballot. But more importantly, Republicans are having a hard time delivering anything.
All the reasons we're going to win. We are going to defy history. It is true. We have to defy history. Only twice in 90 years has the sitting president picked up seats for his party in that first 2-year cycle. But this is a midterm unlike any other, not only because of the threats that we face that are very real and must be confronted, but it's because of a lot of reasons on paper why we should win. We have a great record to run on. You just heard our extraordinary Treasury Secretary recount some of the big wins that we've done. I could do this with you all day, talking about the 700 bills we passed through the House, the 100 executive orders we've codified, and all the great things we've done for hardworking American families, and pro-family policies and pro-life policies, and we're fulfilling our promises. We have better candidates than the Democrats do. They are on the verge of an open civil war because the establishment Democrats are being pushed out by the Marxists. They're having a lot of disarray on their side, and that will play to our advantage in the midterms. We have, for the first time in 10 years, my friends, we have a slight fundraising advantage over the Democrats. That never happens.
Now, let me break down what Speaker Johnson's doing. Okay, he's very, very much overly optimistic. Now, I know Speaker Johnson. Nice guy. I consider him a friend. He's the kind of guy that you could give the keys to your house and not worry about anything being stolen. But he's also not the same kind of guy that you want to go into a foxhole with. And I mean that with the utmost level of respect. Okay, he has to have some reflection here because his leadership style of filling you with positivity only works with people who are genuinely motivated. He's managing a bunch of crazies, corrupts. And that's just the fact. And everything that he said right now leans on the back of one thing, and that's the Trump administration and what they have done, not what Congress has done. If they've passed these historic bills, why are their numbers so far underwater? Now, Republicans will not continue to turn out to vote if they are not giving us something or someone to vote for. And again, Trump is not on the ballot. And all we ever seem to get lately is something to vote against. And the old adage of vote for us because the Democrats are bad and we don't want them to win is getting pretty old. Now, if they're successful in this midterm, they need to reflect, because if they don't, they may not be around next cycle. They have to tighten it up. They cannot be in the business of just shooting rainbows out of their asses because they think that's what the president and the general population want to hear, because we feel these things in our everyday lives, in our wallets. And even though we love the president, we still know that things need to change. Speaking of the president, what's he doing? Now, I want to tell you before I start that the president has been doing a lot, and the Democrats right now are reacting. They've been caught flat-footed. And they're trying to put together a story now that the president wants to suspend the midterm elections because we are underwater. He knows we're going to lose, et cetera, et cetera. They're trying to say that because they don't know what else to do. Okay, this is their propaganda machine. And they're using former Trump staffers, flunkies who have no issue carrying water for the Democratic Party and pretending as if they're credible simply because the president used to employ them. Now, I want you to look at this guy, Ty Cobb, former Trump lawyer.
Allowed to do as president, which is anything he wants.
President Trump has said in the past that he believes if Democrats win control of Congress in the midterms, that he'll be impeached. When you say that you believe he's intent on declaring a national emergency, what guardrails remain if the president does, in fact, use the power of the federal government to shape how the midterm elections are conducted?
I think the only real guardrail is, for people to get to the polls to vote against.
Yeah, so his story, the president wants to stop the elections because he doesn't want to lose. Well, the president denied that. And take a look.
A national emergency? Are you considering a national emergency around the midterm elections?
Who told you that?
There's been reporting that there's an executive order, proposed executive order about this. Are you looking at that? Are you considering that? What about the voter ID?
Well, they're vultures. Anyway, did you see the smirk he had? All right. Well, I recognize that smirk and that little smile, and that tells me something. But regardless, what you have to look at is what he's seeing, and that's the polling. And it consistently shows that over 80% of Americans support voter ID. It's an issue that transcends party lines. And these polls are coming from every major pollster. It's not one or two. It's all of them. It's all consistent. And recently, what Trump has put in front of us in the form of these declassified documents, that puts us in a genuinely unprecedented situation. And as president, he may decide to take unprecedented measures. They may be called for. It's his duty of the office to make that decision. It would be his prerogative. And the country would have to sort out what comes next. Now, meanwhile, on the ground, Trump is doing a lot of stuff. He's putting together a huge strategy that's worth more than $382 million. And it's aimed specifically at flipping vulnerable seats before November. He's also doing rallies, endorsements, campaign events. And he even was in a high school in Wisconsin last night. Okay? And that's what Trump does best. Okay? We all know that there's nothing better to get voters all excited and riled up than going to a Trump rally. His rallies hold more attendees than most major music concerts. So he's going to have to drive the vote. He knows that. But I also think that he has some safeguards in place just in case. Now, this brings me to my final point. What can we do? You and I. And this is on us. We have to check our voter registration now. We cannot wait until October. If you're in Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Texas, one of these 17 House toss-up seats, your vote carries more weight this cycle than almost anywhere in the country. You can also volunteer. You can show up for the candidates that Trump's endorsed. Contact party leadership in your county, your city, or however the Republican Party is structured where you live. You can find them if you look hard enough. But the fact remains, our political ether is the battleground because right now it's inundated with overconfidence. Listen to what Speaker Johnson's saying about turnout. He's saying there's going to be turnout at record levels. But what he fails to do is explain how that turnout is going to be driven. I mean, look around you right now. Scroll on YouTube. Every account has some over-dramatically titled video saying that President Trump and the Republican Party are single-handedly destroying the Democratic Party on a daily basis. And like I've said before, these people are using ChatGPT to drive a narrative because they're lazy and they see a goldmine on YouTube. Because all of a sudden, ironically, YouTube is allowing conservative content. So what are you getting? You're getting reprocessed, big tech, AI messaging that sounds believable. But it solidifies my position. We need to stay focused on our objectives. We need to be able to separate what's real from what AI and Sam Altman want us to believe. I mean, we've learned this over the years. Our information is fluid, especially in today's day. But more importantly, that flow gets manipulated very easily. We have to rely on our own due diligence, our own discernment, because there are forces out there that are actively working and would love for us to do nothing more than sit at home in front of our TVs or computers with our iPhones and our MAGA hats while Democrats show up in force and turn all of the progress that President Trump has made into a sideshow. I don't know about you, but I don't want to go through that again. So the plain truth in all of this, 2 seats in the House, 4 in the Senate, that's all that separates us from 2 years of Trump actually governing, from 2 years of subpoenas, hearings, and an impeachment vote that may or may not go anywhere. And that's all going to depend on what happens in exactly one chamber of Congress. And November 3rd is going to decide what version we get. And it's up to us, kick some ass and win this midterm, because those jokers in Congress, they're not going to do it for us. It's easy to be in the cheap seats, and that's where they love to be. More importantly, that's where they'd love us to be. They only need us every 2 years and when they need $1. So, folks, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit the like button, and I want to say thank you for all of you being here, and I appreciate you more than you know. God bless you. God bless America. God bless President Trump, and let's go.
Is that JR? Yes. But we love you, JR. Thank you very much. Thank you, man. This guy, he's a genius. Thank you, JR. Really nice.